Trying to do the screen share.
Okay. Well, yeah, I can see that he's on.
Okay. We'll go ahead and are we good on recording? Is everything set up
Yes,
for
sir.
that?
Yes, the
Awesome. All right.
recording started.
All right, Mr. Chair, sorry about that. We are ready to get started.
All right. Thanks, David. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Commission for Transportation Disadvantaged Business meeting, last one of the year. We'll now call this meeting to order. Director Darm, would you please call the roll?
Okay, when I state your name, please signify that you are here. Chair Stevens?
Here.
Commissioner Barrios?
Here.
Commissioner Gray?
Here.
Commissioner Knight?
Here.
Commissioner Tellez? I saw Commissioner Tellez at one point on the Commissioner Tellez.
Make sure to unmute Commissioner Tellez.
I'm here.
Great. A quorum, full quorum is present, Mr. Chair.
Okay, we are hosting this meeting obviously through Teams, through web-based delivery. We're asking everyone on the meeting to please mute your microphone if you are not speaking, so that we don't get background noise, please. As you are able, we go ahead and get the next slide. Yeah, there we go. There we go. As you're able, please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance and follow along with me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, thank you, everyone. Just basic introductions. We will now ask our commissioners and any advisors on the phone to introduce themselves and the agency that they represent on the commission. Please remember that you have to unmute on there, or if you're on the phone, you have to hit *6 to unmute the line. So with that, I will start with the commissioners, and then anyone else can chime in. So first of all, Vice Chair Gray.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Christine Gray. I live in Brevard County. We've been on the commission almost 4 years. And my interest is transportation. I'm a person with a disability. I have cerebral palsy. I've worked in the disability field over 20 years. And one of the many reasons, but one of the main reasons I really wanted to participate with the commission this go around, even though I've had interaction with the commission throughout the years, being a transportation user or paratransit user, is that although I have a disability, my son does not. I have a 12-year-old son, and he is not disabled. And so that has made it very interesting to try to negotiate transportation for both of us.
Okay, thank you, Vice Chair Gray. Commissioner Barrios.
Hi, my name is Lillian Barrios. I'm from Tallahassee. I've been with the commission about 1 year and 8 months now. Joined from the perspective of a consumer, and definitely glad to be here. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Knight.
Good morning. My name is Renee Knight. I'm Vice President of Community Services for ElderSource. I live in the Jacksonville area. I have been on the commission since 2019. I have over 27 years experience working with seniors and senior programs. My interest for being on the commission is our seniors and their critical need for transportation. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Commissioner Knight. Dr. Tellez.
Good morning. Good morning. I'm actually calling from Miami-Dade County. I've been on the commission since 2016. And my interest, I'm a registered nurse in the state of Florida, and I have worked with Miami-Dade, worked with Baptist Health South Florida, and my interest really has been supporting those who have disabilities that are working and need transportation to get back and forth to work. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Les. My name's Phil Stevens. I reside in Tampa in Hillsborough County. I'm a professional engineer, a transportation engineer by profession. So transportation is near and dear. But even nearer and dearer is my son, Jared, who's behind me here, who's 24-year-old and has cerebral palsy. So access to transportation is the tie that binds life together. And so we needed to work on some of those things. So that's the reason I got involved in the commission. So, all right. Thank you, everyone. Anyone else? I see Rochelle, you're on. You want to go ahead?
Sure. I'd like to say good morning to all. I am Rochelle Munson. I'm a Senior Assistant Attorney General with the Office of the Attorney General. I serve as legal counsel to this esteemed commission. Thank you.
Okay. Any advisors on the call? Please.
Yes, good morning. This is Diane Harris. I'm with the Department of Children and Families, and I've been on the commission since 2006, working with everybody.
Okay,
So I'm happy to be here.
Good morning,
thank you.
Krista Carter, advisor from the Department of Elder Affairs. I've been with the commission since 2019, and I've been working with our seniors since 2011.
Thanks, Chris. Anyone else? Any other advisors on the call today, on the meeting? Okay, if someone shows up, you can always jump in and introduce yourself. Just some rules of engagement. Remember, this is a public meeting and therefore operates under Florida's government in the Sunshine Act. The meeting is being recorded, and all verbal, written, text, chat box, anything and everything is going to be logged within the meeting minutes. So just a reminder for commissioners to not communicate privately, meaning even in the chat box in any way with any other board members, in order to ensure the discussions remain compliant within the Sunshine Act. For the public comment segment, we'll follow our normal format. The first public comment segment is intended for agenda items only. So remember, the first one's just agenda items. And then we have a second public comment section that is open to any topic during that second public comment segment. We have asked participants intending to speak, to please submit a public comment form prior to the meeting and indicate whether you're speaking on the webinar or the phone. We'll first call on those who submitted the form. Then we'll go to the folks on the webinar that you can indicate in the chat box if you're willing, if you're wanting to make a public comment. And then we'll go to the phone after that. So everyone, we're asking that you identify yourself by your name. Obviously, if you represent an organization and your county of residence, if you don't mind. Speakers are limited in both public comment segments to 5 minutes for the public comments. So with that, we can change the slide and move on to the first public comment segment. Thank you. We'll now call on speakers who submitted a public comment form to Director Darm prior to today's meeting. As mentioned, please direct comments to agenda items only during this segment. We'll notify you when you have 1 minute left of your 5-minute limit. So with that, do we have any forms submitted this morning?
No, Mr. Chair, we do not.
Okay. Then we'll move to the webinar participants. Is anyone on the webinar today like to make a public comment about agenda items? Not, we'll move to the phone. Remember, phone, you have to hit *6. So anyone on a phone line wish to make public comment about agenda items at this point? Remember, if you're having any troubles connecting or being heard, then you can send a note in the chat box or whatever to get someone's attention for some assistance. So with that, let's move on to the next item. So the commission, we convened our last business meeting September 15th of this year. The draft minutes were provided in the business meeting packet. Before we take a vote, are there any questions or comments or revisions needed on those meeting minutes for September 15th of this year? We do have, there's a typo on the screen, so we'll get that corrected. It's December 2023 is our current meeting.
My apologies. Sorry about that.
No worries. I just
Thank you. For
wanted to make
catching
sure
me.
we get it corrected. I didn't want to confuse anyone on the call. So
We
Not
also
that
had
those-
the wrong date. We also had the wrong date on the agenda when we first set it out. So
yeah,
it's just been
Okay.
it's been a season of typos. Sorry about that.
there you go. That's right. Not that 2022 wasn't a good year too, but it's just if not any comments, then I need a motion to approve the minutes as submitted. Commissioners.
Gray,
This is,
make a
this is-
motion to approve the minutes. Sorry, Commissioner Tellez.
Commissioner Tellez, seconds.
Okay. All right, we have a motion and second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. Thank you. With that, the meeting minutes are approved. So the next item up on the agenda, we can change screen, is our 2024 commission event calendar. So as you can see, the schedule of proposed commission meeting dates was provided. There's the one error, the 23rd, not the 22nd of September. So make sure you note that. Or you can just stay an extra day, whatever you wish. But it's the 23rd. And are there any questions about the proposed dates and or events? Which starts in January with the TD Legislative Awareness Day, and then a March meeting, June meeting, September meeting, and then our September workshop, and then the December 11th business meeting. It's very similar to this year's schedule. Any questions or comments about the calendar?
And just to emphasize that this is tentative. We're not, if there is a situation that comes up that we have to adjust the schedule or we have to add a meeting, of course we will adjust. But just to plan everyone's calendars for a year.
Right. Okay. And you notice too, the locations, which are also critical. There's one to be determined in March, but the rest we try to move the meetings around the state to make it a little bit easier to attend in person if you would like, if it's allowing. So with that, this is an action item to publish the schedule. We need to publish this. It's tentative. We can make adjustments as we move through the year and things change. There's not an issue with that. But for right now, is there a motion to approve the schedule as shown with the correction to the September 23rd date?
This is Commissioner Gray. I'll make a motion to approve the calendar with the exception to adjust the schedule where needed.
Okay, thank you. Can I get a second?
Commissioner Knight, seconds.
Thank you very much. With that, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 And I also approve. Okay, let's move to the next discussion of the 2022 Annual Performance Report, also known as the APR. Each year, the commission is required to present this report to the governor and the legislature. This report includes summary statistics on the transportation disadvantaged services that were performed during the previous state fiscal year. And just a reminder, the state fiscal year runs from, in this year, July 1 of 2022 through June 30th of 2023. So the draft 2023 annual performance report was provided last Monday. Director Don will provide an overview in a few minutes. He'll also ask Casey Perkins, representing Thomas Howell Ferguson, to present some findings from the analysis of data within the report, and then we can have a discussion about the report in general. So with that, Director Dorn.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chair. So, I think all of you have been through this process many times now, so I'll be very brief in the overview. As the chair mentioned, we have this as a requirement that we have to submit to the governor and legislature on January 1st. So most of the content in the draft report is similar format to what we've done in the past few years, an overview of the program and some of the discussions of our accomplishments. But as far as the basis of the meat of the report consists of two data sets, one being the macro system-wide overview that is reported in the annual operating report. That is the data that the CTC submit to us on all their operating data, on all the services being provided in the county that they have oversight or they have information on. And then the second component is the micro programmatic view, which is consisting of our trip and equipment grant data. So that is the services that we are directly reimbursing for the past fiscal year. So that is an overview as far as the content. As far as the accomplishments, we highlighted this year that we got restored funding for the Innovative Service Development Grant. As you remember, we had that funding repealed under the MCORs the year prior. So we were able to get that restored to $4 million. So the report captures that. We also talk about the legislative accomplishments we made in the 2023 session to get an increase in our budget authority. And then finally, we talk very briefly about conducting a study on how we can improve, explore ways of improving the annual operating report in the future. So that's an overview of the narrative. And now I'll turn it over to Casey to get into more about the data, especially as it relates to the invoices.
All right, thank you, David. I'm not able to share my screen at the moment, but I can actually talk about it until that is possible. But really, in the narrative of the APR, the draft report, you probably saw the high level takeaway, which is, out of the 4 years of data we now have for the trip and equipment grant, the most recent year for which we've compiled the data, 2022-23 last fiscal year, actually saw the largest number of trips of any of the 4 years that we've compiled data for. It actually came in just over 1.4 million trips total for the trip and equipment grant. And that's the highest year ever since, COVID hit, ever since 2019, 2020. And there's a little bit of a caveat to that. So if you remember 2019, 2020, which saw it just below 1.4 million, that year had a huge dip really kind of in the last 3 months when COVID did hit. So when you look at the actual daily number of trips, looking at it chronologically, really like peak performance right before COVID hit, you're looking at really 7,000 trips a day roughly on average. And in 2022, 2023, you were just over 6,000 daily trips. So not quite really at that peak of where we were before the pandemic, but getting closer, definitely way more trips compared to the last couple of years. And then the other thing that will be accompanying this year's APR is the county profiles. And you may be familiar with that from last year. It's actually up on CTD's website. But for each county or each service area, we provide really kind of 3 snapshots, and we'll have all 4 years of data this year. We had 3 years of data last year. But the first look at it, you get to see the number of trips in every month. You get to see the number of miles for every month, and then it's broken down by mode of transportation. So those modes of transportation are ambulatory, wheelchair, group per passenger, and stretcher. Second look of the trips, you'll get to see really how they kind of are distributed by days of the week and hours of the day. So, how many weekend trips, how many trips are occurring on Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, etc. But also how many trips are occurring between 12 and 1 a.m. or 12 and 1 p.m., etc. every hour of the day. And then the third look, it really looks at the distribution of trips as they cross service area lines or county lines. So for instance, if I were just to take Alachua County right now, I'm going to do it on my screen. But, you know, how many trips occurred for Alachua, like just within Alachua County itself? How many actually crossed over into Bradford? How many crossed over into Putnam and back? That sort of thing. So those are the kind of county profiles that will accompany the APR this year. Should be available this week. And that's really all I have, David. So I'm happy to take any questions.
With that, Casey and Director Darwell, I mean, is this going to be, when will this go up on our website?
So the data is available right now. If you remember, kind of, it's like an interactive PDF, and we're just putting that interactive PDF together. It takes a little bit of time, but it should be available this week easily.
Okay, got it. Commissioners, are there any questions of Casey or Director Darm about the information? It's a little tough when you can't see the graphics, so I understand. Commissioners, any questions? This is being presented as an action item today. So the staff recommendation is to approve the content, the overall content, again, but allow the staff the flexibility to make technical revisions prior to the final submission on January 1st. And these are minor technical, these will not be, main content nor conclusions, recommendations, those sorts of things, to be more of a technical editorial changes. So with that, if there's no discussion, I need a motion to approve the report as it stands, with the one caveat that they can make some technical editorial changes between now and the final report.
This is Commissioner Barrios. I motion to approve.
Thank you, Commissioner Barrios. Do I have a second?
Commissioner Knight seconds.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Knight. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 And aye, it's myself. So motion passes. Thank you, Casey, for that. Next action item. We have two more action items, both of which relate to the Innovative Service Development, also known as the ISD grant program. Director Darm will provide an overview of these items, and then we'll have a discussion and take a vote on them. So with that, Director Darm.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So just to give a brief background, and then we'll get into the action items. Many of you know the Innovative Service Development Grant has been kind of going through.
Director Darm, your volume's falling off and back on. Can you, I don't know if you're moving or your mic's moving.
I think, can you hear me now? Okay.
Yes, that's much better. Thank you.
Okay. I think my hand was in the way. Sorry about that. So as you know, the Innovative Service Development Grant has had quite a evolution over the last 5 or 6 years. We started as the Mobility Enhancement Grant, where it was funded about $1 to $2 million for about 3 years. And then in 2019, we had the multi-use corridors program that gave us $10 million. And that was for 2 years. And then when following COVID-19, we saw that program repealed, which meant the funding for the ISD grant was not funded for a year. And then we got it restored again in 2022 for $4 million. So that was significantly less, but we did find from that year that it was the most competitive year. We awarded we pretty much awarded all of the funding. And then we spent about 2.5 million. I think it was about 60 to 65% of that, which is a pretty good record. And then this current year we're in, we got it increased to 6 million. So through this process, we have been each year trying to strengthen our approach and ensuring that this is competitive, that it's more consistent. So the two action items here are to try to bring in a little bit more consistency year over year. Obviously, there are some things that are out of our control, like what the legislature decides to do in a given session could change the structure of the program potentially. But that's just kind of to give you all from our perspective in terms of policy development. We've got a couple of initiatives that we're trying to do to kind of bring this into a more consistent program. First off is the funding. Now, this is not the funding itself is not an action item for today's meeting, but it does provide context to what the two action items are. So based on the last year, we've reviewed our program. We had Thomas Howell help us put an analysis together and looking at the funding. And we've posted that report, by the way, on our homepage. So if for those who are interested, you can look at that on your own time. But this chart shows the history of the program, and you see that the $4 million that was the first time we were able to award all of that funding since MCORS, and we spent the most. And of course, being that we're on a reimbursement schedule and many of these projects are starting for the first time, it does take some time for these projects to start getting the services up and running. So that's why often you'll see a delay in the reimbursement for a given year. So, but based on that, the intention of this program is largely to try something new and to encourage competition. This legislative session, we are requesting 4 million, not 6 million, but 4 million to be funding for the ISD grant. And I'll get a little bit more into that in the LBR discussion. But this kind of provides context to going into the next year. In the past, we have implemented our requirements based on what's in statute or what's in legislative proviso, which basically is like statute in a budget sense. Those dictate what our requirements are, or the bare minimum that we have to follow. And that included this past couple of years has been caps on the funding, who is eligible to receive the funding, how many projects are we allowed to award for a service area, et cetera. Our rule language, which is what we implement, that rule language had not been changed since the MCORS program was put together. So in essence, what that means is that our requirements have been dictated by proviso and statute, not necessarily by rule. So what we're trying to do for this proposal, for this action item, is to codify the rule, to bring it back up to date from 2018's language to basically the language that we've implemented in proviso. And the goal here is that, if a given year the legislature decides to not include legislative proviso, we have something to fall back on in rule that's going to be more consistent. And our hope is that we can try to keep the program mostly consistent year over year. So as you know, sometimes we've had to change our instructions in the middle of a cycle because there might have been change in the legislative proviso or in statute. So that is basically what we're proposing. The language was in the packet. So this is an action item. Most of the changes are not substantively different than what we've done over the last 2 years. It's just codifying what was in proviso. We're changing the name from Innovation and Service Development to Innovative Service Development, which we have done basically through all our instructions. It's just codifying it in rule. We're encouraging CTCs to work with non-traditional providers when it's appropriate. The proposed rule language includes the caps and funding that was in the proviso the last 2 years. So $750,000 is the max for a single service area project, and 1.5 million is for a regional project is the max. We update the program objectives. The objectives in the rule were prior to MCOR's objectives, so we're updating that. And we're including a requirement for a 10% match, which again has been in proviso, but we're putting it in rule as well. So Rochelle is on the call, and I know we talked briefly last week, but I wanted to give the floor to her to see if there was anything that she had in addition to what we put in the packet. Were there any changes or proposed changes that were that we might not have seen when we put this together in the packet? So Rochelle, is there anything you'd like to add?
Nothing, Director Durham. The language looks good, and I think that it will be able to get through rulemaking without much of a glitch.
Great. So with that,
Okay.
commissioners, if you have any questions, the rule language will get into time limits after we take a vote on the rule language.
Just a quick question. This is Phil Stevens. The changing the language, the title, innovation, anything, do any of these changes create an issue with any cross-referencing documents and or rules, meaning the nomenclature, would that get up? Does that cause any issue anywhere else with any connecting documents, let me call it like that you're aware of, I guess?
Not that I am aware of. If there's anyone on our team that wishes to like Sherry or Karen, if there's anything that y'all see as a concern, but I think the main thing we did put in there, we did clarify service, designated service area, and the proviso, it said county. But what, we have systems, and we've talked about this with the legislative staff. We have CTCs that are serving multiple counties as a service area. So we wanted to clarify that when it says service area as it's a single service area project, not just a county. So if say, for example, if Lynx from Orlando, which serves Orange, Osceola, and Seminole as one service area, wanted to apply for a single project, a single service area project, they would be limited to 750,000 on their max, unless they wanted to serve outside of that service area and make it a regional project.
Okay. Thank
If
you.
I may, and if I may, to
Yeah.
Chair Stevens' point, if we run across any nomenclature inconsistencies, you are correct, Chair Stevens, we would need to update that form or that document or any other language that may have been overlooked in another rule where innovation has not been changed to innovative or something of that nature. Everything would need to ultimately be consistent.
Okay,
But
thank you.
it does not impact the rulemaking for this.
Okay, got it. Any other questions, commissioners? If not, we're going to do this in two bites, if you will. The first one is going to be, the first motion I'll need is to approve the proposed language changes to the rule. And then the second one we'll discuss in a minute, talking about time limits. So with that, I need a motion to approve the recommended changes to the rule.
This is Commissioner Tellez, and I approve.
Okay, got a motion? Can I get a second?
Commissioner, I'll second.
Thank you. With that, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Aye as well. So thank you, that approved. So our second item related is dealing with the proposed time changes on the number of years a program can be considered eligible for funding under the Innovative Service Development Grant Program. Commissioner Director Darm, you'll provide an overview of that as well.
Yes. So partly because of all the moving pieces of this program, not knowing from one year to the next what our funding situation was going to look like, what our requirements were going to look like, we have not been able to address this issue, and I believe this is the year where we're seeing at least promising prospects of continuing and making the program more consistent. However, we also understand that the 4 million, if the legislature picks up our request, that's going to limit the amount of pot of money that we could also be able to give to projects in the future. So given that this program is defined as innovative, partly in that means new, that we're testing a new service, the expectation is that this is going to not be permanent funding, but it will be something that we're testing. And we obviously can't control from one year to the next what the legislature funds, but we do have control over our expectations and regulations here. And one of the questions we wanted to pose today was putting time limits on when a project can be considered eligible. And I want to emphasize considered eligible. That doesn't necessarily guarantee that a project's going to be funded for multiple years, but rather that they would be considered as part of the application pool in a given year. So what we are proposing is three options for the commission to consider. Option for 3 years, an option for 4 years, or 5 years. And what we're proposing is not just to apply this for new projects, but the current existing projects. So in the packet, I believe y'all have a spreadsheet that shows the existing projects that we currently have approved for this current fiscal year. Those are 12 projects, and when those projects were approved prior to this year. So you can kind of get a sense. And of course, it was a little tricky because we did have 1 year where we did not have funding when the MCORS was repealed. So we did not count that year in terms of the chronology, longevity of these projects. But what we're basically, again, what we're proposing is a consideration of applying a restriction on the time that they're considered eligible, and this would apply to the current projects as well as new projects. So this slide here shows the table of the current projects that would be affected under each option, meaning on that middle column, that means those projects, if you approve one of these options, would not be considered eligible for this upcoming grant application cycle for the new fiscal year of 24-25, so starting July 1 of 2024. So you have basically seeing how those would be impacted under each option, and then what going forward, what those time limits would be applied going forward into the future. Again, this is just to get for planning purposes, so those projects are aware of it before we go into the application cycle. It is also a goal of ours to try to, with good faith effort, to approve projects on a multi-year basis, you know, assuming that they're meeting the expectations, they haven't changed or deviated from what we approved in their scope. The idea here is that a lot of these projects are going to take some time to demonstrate results, and we've seen this as a particular challenge for the first year or so for some of these projects to get off the ground. So though it would be an expectation that each year that project still gets reviewed and still gets ultimately decided by the commission whether or not to approve funding for that project, our hope is that we can be able to have, like we did this past year, a first round of first right of consideration for the projects that are existing and being considered eligible as we look at all the applications that come in for the fiscal year. So that's kind of an overview. I will now, is there anything I have missed, Sherry or Karen, that is important about the time limits and how this will affect our application process moving forward that I might have missed in the overview?
No, I think you hit it right on.
David?
Yes, Commissioner.
This is Commissioner Tellez. Could you go into a little bit more of why the subcommittee kind of struggles with that term of innovative, and why the term, I can understand the term limits, but also struggling with the fact that maybe that innovation loses its understanding over a certain period of time?
Right. So I'll do my best to try to reflect what the discussions have been. We've struggled for many years now as a committee, and when to determine when when a project is considered no longer new. And I think where we were going, we had looked at FDOT's service development grant to get some guidance. Most of those projects, if I understand it correctly, are funded on a 3-year cycle. So we've been wanting to approach this, but we did not want to do this until we talked about it at the last application cycle back in May, I believe, and we didn't feel it was appropriate to make that call in the midst of an application cycle. We wanted to discuss this as a policy before we enter into another application cycle. But in essence, to answer your question, Commissioner Tellez, we felt that innovative at some point has to be determined as no longer innovative. Like, I'll use a very simple example. When the iPod was created back in the early 2000s, it was very innovative. But by, now we're many years later, the iPod is no longer considered innovative. So, thinking in those terms, when do we say as a general practice when a project should be have reached its testing phase, it's reached its end point, and needs to begin to look for other ways of sustaining it in the long term, and having a kind of an expectation in the front end that you're probably not going to expect it to be funded for after a certain amount of years, helps these projects to be able to start planning ahead instead of it getting notified 2-3 months before the fiscal year ends. So I hope that answered your question.
Yes, it did. I think as chair of that committee, I think we just really struggled sometimes as we looked at what was being proposed. And we just want to make sure that we don't have a situation where I've heard some committees, or should I say some counties, say that, well, without this funding, we would not be able to do this project. I think the goal really is to have a pilot timeline, and then if it wanted to be continued, to find some sort of funding that will continue that project.
And I'm Commissioner Joe as well, I'm a fan of this, requiring a sustainability plan for, for these projects. Again, we'll be approving these on a year-to-year basis, so there's no guarantee, but I do believe that we need to, the sustainability element needs to be addressed upfront and continuously throughout the project, just so that there's that expectation and understanding that, that it is a pilot program to find new ways of delivering services to the population, and it's not meant to be a continuous funding source. So any other questions, commissioners? Okay, any other comments? Director Darm on the program, time limit?
Just that which option you prefer. We put in there a little bit more generous options to consider, and I'll just say just the thought process behind that has been based on our experience. 3 years is the ideal, but what reality has been is that usually the first year is very challenging for most of these projects to get set up, and there's a couple of variables we've seen that's contributed to a delay. Many of that is not inside the control of the CTC. They may be needing to do the best they can to get things started up, but they are also a lot of these projects may have contracts that they have to build, say with the TNC, that causes delays. We may have some challenges between our staff and the CTC in designing the scope. So even if the project is well thought out on an application, we still have to come up with a way to making sure that we're implementing it in a contract year. So with those variables in mind, even though we still want to make sure that there's an expectation that the project's going to have to perform and report on their outcomes to y'all as we did this past year, there is also an understanding that with all the best intentions, there can be, especially at the beginning, some mistakes or some things that come out that are not anticipated even when they're developing their proposal for consideration. So.
Okay, so we need to make a motion for one of the three options, correct, today?
That's right.
I'm sorry, this is Commissioner Barris. I did have one question, if that's okay.
Yeah, sure.
Thank you. I'm just wondering, is there some kind of requirement that applicants especially if they're applying, for years 2, 3, 4, show that they are moving towards sustainability?
Well, we'll have requirements on the, for them to be able to report on the current year that they're in. So I don't know if you remember, Commissioner Barrios, when we had in March this past year, we had a workshop right after the commission meeting where we got to see each of the projects come up, but each of the CTCs that got awarded to present a progress report basically on what they're doing. And Sherry, correct me if I'm wrong, I think we've also had in the past put in the application that they have to describe in the long term maybe what they're going to expect. But correct me if I'm wrong, I might have misremembered that. So it may be addressed in their proposal as well when we review their application.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Well, the staff is staff recommending a 4-year option 2? Am I hearing that correctly?
Oh, well, I would say, given our experiences, 4 years seems to be a more reasonable number than 3, given that it might take a year to develop it, and then that would give us 3 years to observe it. I think that's the service development grants 3 years, but given our challenges, our recommendation would be 4 years. But that's up to the commission as to what y'all decide on which one seems more reasonable.
Sure, and my personal opinion is I agree with 4. I'm not a fan of 5. It's pushing it way out there in the year for the startup and working out the kinks, and then 3 more years to figure out how to sustain it. Seems reasonable to me. Commissioners, any thoughts on which option?
This is Commissioner Tellez. I would definitely agree with you on the 4-year limit.
Okay.
This is Commissioner Knight. I also agree on the 4-year.
And then this is Commissioner Gray. I also agree on the 4-year limit.
Okay, well, we seem to, let's move forward then. If most of the folks are in agreement, I need a motion to pick a certain option from the commission.
This is Commissioner Barrios. I motion to approve the 4-year.
Okay, we have a motion to approve option 2 for the 4-year limit. Do I have a second of that motion?
Commissioner Knight seconds.
Thank you. All those in favor of option 2, 4-year limit, signify by saying aye.
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 And I'll say aye. Any opposed? And Director Jarman, the motion carries for option 2, 4-year limit. All right, thank you, everyone. That completes the action items for this meeting. We'll move on to informational items at this time.
If I may, Chair Stevens,
Yes.
because this is rulemaking and it was an action item, if the commission intends to move forward with it, I do have to ask the required questions, cert questions.
Sure.
To actually initiate the rulemaking. We don't do too much rulemaking, so the commission may not remember them, but they are 3 standard questions. 2 have been longstanding, and the third is fairly new. The first is, will the proposed rule amendments have an adverse impact on small business? Or will the proposed rule amendments be likely to directly or indirectly increase regulatory costs to any entity, including government, in excess of $200,000 in the aggregate in Florida within a year after the implementation of the rule?
So if I may, just to add context, this is really just to implement our grant program and our application process. This is not your, these rules are not like a typical regulatory going into a business and, doing some kind of inspection or anything of that nature. So from a staff side, just to let you all know this, from our point of view, this is not a rule change that would have, that would be an answer of no to those questions. just to clarify from our perspective.
Thank you, David,
Yeah.
Director Brown.
Yeah, and I agree as well. I can't see, I mean, based on my information I've been presented to date, that either one of those questions, the answer would be no at this point in time. Do we need to have a vote on these questions, or?
We are
Let's-
required to vote. We are required to vote on each of them, sir. So that
Okay,
would, that
all right.
first is a collective. So that would, if it's a vote, it would be, I move that we vote no for the question as presented would be fine as a motion goes.
So we need to do each one, number 1 and 2 separately then.
No, you could just do that one together. I have 2 more questions that I
Okay.
will follow.
Could you reread that one question just so that everybody understands what we're voting on?
Sure.
Yeah, thanks.
Will the proposed rule amendments have an adverse impact on small business, or will the proposed rule amendments be likely to directly or indirectly increase regulatory costs to any entity, including government, in excess of $200,000 in the aggregate in Florida within 1 year after the implementation of the rule?
Okay, so for question 1, I need a motion to, this is interesting, a motion to state our answer as a no to question 1 as a commission.
No, and normally, just to clarify, most boards respond, I move that the rule amendments will not have an adverse impact, as stated.
Okay, yeah, so I need a motion along those lines, please. Commissioners.
I motion that the answer to that question, to our first question, be no. This is Commissioner
They've had a
Barnes.
motion. I'm sorry, go ahead. We
that
have a
is
motion
sufficient.
that there's no adverse impact. Do we have a second?
Commissioner
This is-
Knight seconds.
Thank you. All those who approve that the rule change will not have an adverse effect as indicated, indicate by saying aye.
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 Aye as well. So question number 1. All right, number 2.
Well, should a violation of this rule or any part of this rule be designated a minor violation? This question usually pertains to some type of disciplinary issue, does not appear to be necessarily applicable to these rule amendments. So if the commission chooses to move that it does not, it would be appropriate.
Okay, so I need a motion to indicate that this does not, as indicated.
This is Commissioner Tellez. I would agree with that motion.
Okay, thank you. I need a second.
This is Commissioner Gray. I second.
All those in favor indicating no to question number 2, indicated by saying aye.
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 Aye. Motion is approved. Okay, number 3.
The last question is a fairly new question instituted by the office, the executive office, since 2019. Should a sunset language be included? And the language would read, this rule shall be reviewed and if necessary, repealed, modified, or renewed through the rulemaking process 5 years from the effective date. What that language technically means for the commission's benefit is that if the commission votes to include the sunset language as stated, the commission will be required to revisit the rule, the entirety of the rule. If there is no revision or any type of review of it, the rule in its entirety will be repealed. Normally, if the rule is deemed mandatory, meaning there appears to be some type of statutory basis to implement the rule, there is not considered usually a need for a sunset provision to be included. If it's considered discretionary, there is a discussion that may happen during this rulemaking process as to the requirement or the necessity of an inclusion of a sunset provision. I can further, and I can further state that this rule appears to be an outreach of this grants program information that is referenced in statute. That could be an argument that could be used to not include a sunset provision in the paperwork that's submitted.
Right, and if I may just add that this is the same rule chapter provision that we amended back in 2020 and 2021 when it was pertaining to the trip and equipment grant formula. So all the grant programs are listed in this section of rule. We did not do a sunset provision for that. Our recommendation as a staff would be to go with a no on that answer, putting a sunset provision, given that this is pretty mandatory of basically implementing our trust fund, how our funds are distributed through the respective grant programs that we administer.
Okay, and I would agree with that. It seems to be covered elsewhere. So with that, any conversation about the sunset provision question? If not, I need a motion to indicate that we do not see a need for a sunset provision.
This is Commissioner Barrios. I motion not to include a sunset provision.
Thank you. Need a second.
Commissioner Knight seconds.
Thank you. All those in favor of answering no to the question indicate by saying aye.
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 Aye as well.
Aye.
Yep. Okay, thank you. So with that, that completes the action items.
Okay,
This is-
thank you.
Thank you. Now we'll move to the informational items on the agenda. So Director Dar will now provide a report on the Commission's legislative budget request for the next fiscal year, in addition to providing an update to our fiscal year goals. So with that, Director Dar.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So we did talk about this already with the Innovative Service Development Grant, but just to clarify, we have a legislative budget request for $5 million total, an additional budget authority. So I think y'all have been through this enough times where we explain the budget authority does not mean new revenues from a different source. That is merely just giving us an additional authority to use our existing revenues and cash that's already within the trust fund or projected to be in the trust fund to go towards our grant programs. The bulk of that request is to support the ISD grant of $4 million. Again, that would be less than what we got the current fiscal year, but with these provisions that we had just talked about, especially with the time limits, that will help us with keeping this program competitive. And then in addition to that, we've also got for the remaining of the $1 million in that request, a portion of that to go to the Shirley Conroy Capital Assistance Grant. That's to address the increase in costs that we've seen on the capital equipment. So that would be, if I understand correctly, in addition to what the FDOT transfer of $1.4 million that goes to us each year for that grant, this would be tacked on top of that to support projects to purchase of capital equipment. We also have an additional amount of funding to go into the planning grant. That's because we have a rule required when anytime the legislature gives a raise to the state workforce, we in turn adjust our planning grant to a 5%, I believe. And that is because the planners who get recipients of that grant, these are the MPOs or regional planning councils or other groups that we contract with to do the planning for the TD program. They're basically functioning as an extension of the CTD staff on the local regional level to support the implementation of their program. So that is something we've done each time the legislature has adjusted. So we're just making that in our budget to reflect that adjustment. And then finally, just a portion of what's ever left over will go through the trip and equipment grant, which is pretty nominal of an amount. So that's our budget request for 24-25. One other point, just to clarify an update, the governor's recs came out last week, and it is pretty much reflecting the same request, except we're asking for this to be on a recurring year-over-year basis, and they have it in their request for a non-recurring, so 1 year basis of this authority. So substantively, the content is the same, the request is the same. It's just a matter of whether or not it would be 1 year, one fiscal year, or multiple fiscal years that this budget would be approved. So it would ultimately be on the legislature side to decide what to do with that. But just to let you know, that is where we stand with our budget for so far going into legislative session. Any questions on the budget?
Okay, if there's not any questions, I guess we move the executive director report, right?
Yes. So last year, last commission meeting, I brought up some goals that we have for the current fiscal year, and I wanted to give you all an update on those goals. So just to remind y'all, the goals were 5 goals. One being to fill all our CTD staff positions, implement raises and adjust position descriptions as necessary to help improve our program overall and growing our program, meeting the needs of our system. Then goal 2 is to develop the 5-year state transportation disadvantage plan that's required in our statute, at least to begin that process. We anticipate that's going to take more than just this year to implement, but I'll get into that in a minute about where we are with that process. Goal 3 is to fill our appointments for the commission, and that's both commissioners and advisors for the agencies. 4 is to test the collection of new ways of collecting the AOR data. That's to implement our AOR study. And then goal 5 is to review our quality assurance process and looking at where we can maybe make some streamline or changes there. So these are the goals for the fiscal year. The fiscal year goes till June 30th. So for today, I'm just going to go through 4 of the 5. The 5th goal, we're going to pick that up starting at the new year to look into where we can address that. But for today, I'll just give you a quick overview where we're at with the staff positions. We just hired a new project manager, Monica. She had just started on a few weeks ago. So we're happy now that we have 6 project managers. These are the individuals who are looking at each of the regions of the state, working very closely with our CTCs and our planners. So we're very pleased to have Monica join us and having a full team there. We also implemented salary raises for the team, the existing staff, starting in September. So that was what the legislature gave us budget for. So we have completed that item. And then all of last month was dedicated to interviewing for a new position we just got budget for last year to create a data analyst position. So as you all know, we do most of our data analytics through contract with Thomas Howell. So we wanted to get and enhancing that process, enhancing that quality by having someone on our team. So we are in the phase now of a selection of that candidate. So I hope to have an introduction of that person at the next commission meeting. So goal 1 is in moving in a really good direction as far as having a full team and building our team going into the future. That kind of leads into the segue into the second goal, which is really going to be, I think, both a priority for this current fiscal year and next, is the development of our 5-year plan. We are looking at getting a contract set up with a vendor that will help us facilitate that development. We did put out a scope advertised through our state term contract. That is a process that we usually go through when we start a soliciting for input. We did not get any we did not receive any proposals when we put that out in November. So our team is going to reconvene after we're finished with this meeting to look at how we can get that scope advertised in other ways of getting whether advertised or doing a selection, maybe through either a university or through a bid. So I don't have much update as far as that goes, but our goal is that we try to get the vendor secured in the next few months with the goal of getting following legislative session being dedicated to starting the development of that plan. But we'll keep you posted as we go through that process. Goal 3, I'm doing the best I can on my side to work with the governor's office. They are obviously very busy this season with putting their budget together. We have had a few conversations about the appointments. But at this time, I have no updates as far as when that would be made. But as soon as that does happen, obviously we will send out a notice. And even though on the agenda we had our dates scheduled for commission business meetings, but be prepared that once we get those appointments made, our goal would be to have a new commissioner, new member orientation, and some presentations lined up when that happens. So we'll give ample notice before that occurs. That will be publicly noticed. So anybody from the public could participate in that discussion since you would have multiple commissioners there. So, and then finally, the goal for the AOR study, we have been meeting with our counterparts at the Department of Transportation's Office of Information Technology, as well as Thomas Howell Ferguson, who will be assisting us again. Consider this sort of the second phase of this AOR study. At the last commission meeting, y'all approved recommendations to test a different way of collecting that for this current fiscal year. So we will be looking at, starting in January, developing a timeline and some guidance on how we can go about collecting that. So right now we need to work the tech side, the infrastructure needs, to be sure that we have those pieces in place before we can go forward with gathering data, seeing a way of testing this and reporting back outcomes to y'all. So stay tuned on these. We're going to have more at the subsequent commission meetings, but just to kind of give you an overview of that. One other thing to add on my executive director report, just as an FYI, as you all know, we had our conference canceled this year due to the hurricane, and that meant our award ceremony was also canceled. So just to let you all know, we are in the process of going and presenting the awards individually in the communities to the local coordinating boards. So we just presented a few weeks ago to Indian River for their award of Volunteer of the Year. We will be presenting also later this week to St. Lucie County and Palm Beach, which was why we had to change the commission meeting date to earlier this week so we could accommodate for those schedules. So just to let you all know, we haven't forgotten about you all who've gotten awards. We are slowly getting around to presenting those and look forward to seeing y'all in person at those meetings. So with that, Mr. Chair, that completes my report. Any questions I'll be happy to take.
Okay, thank you, Director Darm. Any questions on the report? Just a clarifying question, David. Just a reminder, how many open commission slots do we have right now that we're waiting appointments for?
We have 2 vacant positions, both of which have representing business. And I believe we have 2 commissioners who are, well, actually one, Mr. Chair, I believe your term is coming up to expiration, sadly. And I believe Commissioner Gray's is also up for her term. So, and I believe the rest of the commissioners, their terms will be expiring in 2025, I believe. So given, we've done this many times where we will have delays in our appointments process. And even if the term is expired, it is practice that we've have commissioners that continue to serve in that role until action is taken at the from the appointments side of the governor's end. Also, just to give you an update on the advisor seats, we do have another seat that needs to be appointed by the governor, our county board seat. So that's also up for action. We're trying to work with them on that. And we have also needing representation from Agency for Healthcare Administration, AHCA, Veterans Affairs, and Department of Economic Opportunity. And I am in discussions with Economic Opportunity, so we are getting close to finding a person. So then the next phase will be getting with AHCA and Veterans Affairs and the governor's office, obviously on the county seat. So long answer to your simple question, Mr.
No, that's fine. I just want to give everyone kind of the laundry list of things. So technically it's 4 commission seats, right?
4 seats that need pending action
Right.
for commissioners, and then I believe 3 advisor seats for needing filling.
Okay, all right. Thank you. Any questions on the executive report? If not, we'll move on to the next item, any commissioner or advisor reports. Any commissioner or advisor reports this time? I did want to mention, and Director Durham, we have talked about this because of my, role here with the commission. I was asked to a year ago, actually, participate in what they're calling the Advanced Air Mobility Working Group for the state, for the FDOT Department of Aviation. It's a large working group that essentially looked at VTOL, vertical takeoff and landing aircraft as it develops, autonomous vehicles, all that whole conversation. They're a long ways away from providing service, but that working group turned into an advisory council now, which they've asked me to be part of because of my role here on the Commission for Transportation Disadvantage. Again, it's really looking at the high level, early stage planning, regulations associated with airspace, safety, security, the equipment that is associated with these VTOL aircraft. And then, so again, I think they're pretty far away from being consumable by the general public. But I am participating. I just want to let everyone know that I am participating because I'm the chair of the CTD on that advisory group now to really make sure that as they're considering development of this new technology, which it is a very, very new technology, that they're also considering the transportation disadvantaged population. So just wanted to, make sure that everyone understood that I was participating in that group. But any other commissioners or advisors? If not, we will move to the second and final public comment segment and closing remarks. We'll now hold our second public comment segment of the agenda. Speakers are welcome to discuss any topic. Reminder, you are limited to 5 minutes. We will give you a 1-minute warning when you have 1 minute left. We'll start with the forms. Do we have any forms submitted?
No, Mr. Chair, no forms.
Okay, anyone in the chat box? Secondly, we'll go to the chat box on the call on the webinar today. Anyone? Looks like there's a hand raised. So, Mr. Ross Silvers.
Good morning, Commissioners. Thank you very much for your thoughtful consideration of all the action items today. I did want to encourage you to work with the staff to see if there's a way to be able to assess with the ISD grants that, say, halfway through the year, that what the spending is looking like for the awardees, and to be able to have staff go back to those awardees and say, hey, if you think you're not going to need all your awarded funds, would you consider allowing those funds to be given to a different awardee who doesn't have enough funds to provide the demand for services in an ISD award, if that makes sense.
Okay, Ross, could you identify, are you with an organization, your county resident? Sorry, I meant to.
My apologies. Sure.
No
Ross
worries.
Silvers with Pinellas County, and I work for PSTA, Pinellas Suncoast Transit Authority.
Okay, thank you very much.
Sure.
So thanks. Yeah. So you're saying it have some kind of mid-year assessment of like looking at burn rate and saying, okay, we may not need all this and and I don't know, Director Darm, if our process allows us to recover funds. We'd have to recover funds and then commit funds to a new project. But does our process allow for fund recovery kind of mid-year? I don't know. I'm not familiar if our process allows that.
Well, it would be tricky. I mean, we can, I'd say we would need to have a talk aside to understand fully what Ross you're suggesting. Are you
Well, I
there, Ross?
understand.
I
Yeah,
overheard
yeah.
talk. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I'm good. I'd be happy to discuss anytime.
Right.
Okay.
Just to clarify for the process that we have is that we award based on what is requested in the application. So now granted, there are times when the commission, and we may be running up against that this year if we get 4 million, where we can't award every amount that's requested because it may be over budget. So we have had to make adjustments as a subcommittee's recommendation. And the other issue, just to to let you know, Ross, and any others out there who are recipients, the issue will also be if we want to go that route, and I'm not saying we should, we would have to get invoices consistently month to month, and some systems we don't get invoices for a good portion of the year until we get closer to the end. So that would have to be under we'd have to be getting consistent data month to month, even to entertain an idea like that. So just a factor to throw out there, but I think we can talk about that internally. We have some time before we start our application process. So just wanted to throw that out there.
Thank you.
Okay. Thanks. All right. Any other on the webinar? Any? Oh, sorry, Rochelle. Sorry.
And this is just a general comment. Regarding the rule the language that's proposed, and I guess it's just for informational purposes. I know the transferability of funds is not necessarily addressed in the rule. I thought I should mention that just for full disclosure purposes. Second, any award of the funds is based on merit. So even if there were any type of transferability option that could be, and the way the rule is written currently is not stated as such, that would be another very severe or serious consideration in any granting of the funds. I just thought I should say that since that comment was made publicly. Thank you, Chair Stevens.
No. Yeah, thanks. Thanks. Appreciate it. Okay. Any other public comments on the webinar or on the phone? Remember, you have to hit star 6. There's a #6, star 6. If not, thank you. So that concludes our second public comment period and our business meeting. We do want to thank everybody who participated. Our next scheduled event is the Legislative Awareness Day at the Capitol, which is January 18th in Tallahassee. And our next business meeting is tentatively scheduled for March 20th. Again, we may have to tweak some of those dates as the year progresses. With that, I need a motion to adjourn, please.
This is Commissioner Barrios. I motion to adjourn.
Thank you. I need a second.
This is Commissioner Tellez. I second.
Thank you. All those in favor of adjourning signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. Any opposed? Then we are adjourned. Thank you, everyone, for your time this morning. Have a great day.
Thank you, you too.